Hey everybody, Gabby Hart here with Fox 26 News. Thank you guys for tuning in to this live stream. It's very personal to me. It's very important to me. Many of you may have already seen my story that showed me as a baby abandoned at Hobby Airport. You've heard about my journey, my sister's journey through foster care. And we wanted to have this conversation today to really take a deeper dive into the main issue, which is a foster care crisis is happening. There aren't enough foster homes. There's a lot going on within the system. And we really want to try to break all that down and raise awareness during National Foster Care Month. So really quickly, before we get started, I do want to play the piece for those of you that missed it, that aired. And then after this piece plays, we'll go ahead and dive into the conversation. So we're going to go ahead and play.
May is National Foster Care Month, and tonight we bring you the story of a baby girl abandoned at Hobby Airport 34 years ago and was recently reunited with the officer who found her.
That baby girl went on a long journey through the foster care system, but where that baby girl is now will leave you in awe. I have goosebumps already. Fox 26's Gabby Hart brings us this story.
I was walking around the garage and I heard a baby crying. So I followed it and I found the baby laying in the back of the pickup truck, and I was looking around like, what is this going on, you know?
On May 27th, 1989, news of a newborn baby abandoned at Hobby Airport made headlines. Former Houston police officer Kathleen Barilla is the woman seen in this newspaper article after finding that baby.
She wouldn't go to anybody but me. So they let me take her downtown.
When I tracked down Officer Barilla, I told her that I worked for Fox 26 and I wanted to speak with her about the infant she found that day. That's all she knew before we met on Zoom.
I always wondered what happened to her, though, you know?
The baby in this news article was identified shortly after being found as 3-month-old Gabrielle Hart, who many of you might know as Gabby Hart, the news reporter.
I never knew the name. I never got her name.
Yeah.
Do you know?
I do.
Can you tell me anything about her? Or?
That child's name was Gabrielle Hart.
Nice. Pretty name.
Yeah. And my name on TV, my on-air name is Gabby Hart, but my real name is Gabrielle Hart. And
Are you the baby?
I am the child that you found that day at Hobby Airport.
Oh my God. You're beautiful. And you know, I do remember the baby being a very cute baby.
Just a few weeks later, Officer Barilla traveled from Buffalo, New York, all the way to Houston.
Oh my goodness! Now I'm so happy that I got to have an ending to this story, you know, and you turned out wonderfully. You know, I remember thinking back then that, you know, how sad I was to leave you down at that juvenile place at the police officer, you know, and you cried when I left, and I cried that night because I didn't want to leave you there.
Yeah. Well, now that we've established that the baby Officer Barilla found in this parking garage was in fact me, I'd like to introduce you to my big sister, Natalie Hart.
I remember having a feeling that it was going to happen.
2 days before my mother left me at Hobby Airport, she flew to San Jose, California, where she abandoned Natalie, just 3 years old, in an airport bathroom.
And I remember looking under the stall and saying, "Mommy, don't leave me." And then when I came out, she was gone.
Our story made national headlines. The news soon reported that my mother suffered from mental illness and felt that she was protecting us by leaving us. Well, Natalie and I eventually flew back to Cleveland, Ohio, where we spent a short time living with our biological family. But when I was just 3 years old and Natalie was 7, we went to foster care.
And it was kind of like, just be normal, pretend nothing's wrong, and just keep living your life. And you can't do that. As an adult, I don't think I would be able to do that.
You know, our mother had her issues. We were never mistreated.
No.
Our biological family or, you know, at the hands of her, we were treated very well. For me, it wasn't until I entered foster care that I was mistreated.
Same. And I've told people that.
After experiencing abuse in our first few foster homes, Natalie and I were separated. I was 5 years old.
That sibling who, you know, may have been their only connection to their sense of who they are is gone.
Dewana Jernigan, president of Arms Wide Adoption and Foster Agency in Houston, says when children experience traumas like this so young, it can make it hard for them to stay in foster homes, which leads to them moving constantly.
that child is not intentionally blowing up a placement. That child is protecting themselves.
I went on to travel through a total of 24 foster and group homes, and when I turned 18, I was on my own. When you look at the statistics for previous foster children, especially those who age out, it's alarming. Less than 3% will graduate from college. They're more likely than their peers to end up homeless, in jail, or on drugs.
On paper, it looked like we should be complete statistics, and we're not.
And it's thanks to the caring foster parents we met along the way, the social workers who went the extra mile, the teachers who provided a safe space, that myself, my sister, and all of those like us have triumphed after foster care.
Having that family, or at least that one consistent adult in their lives, I think can help to disrupt this whole cycle of, children who age out and face these dire consequences.
Did that one good foster mother cancel out all of the terrible ones?
I would say yes. It definitely, I would say yes, because it made me realize people aren't all the same.
And there are so many children and teens in foster care for reasons beyond their control, and they're in need of good foster parents.
Yeah, I chose to share my story not to garner sympathy or pity, but to inspire.
So thank you all for taking the time to sit down and listen to that. I do want to introduce the panel that I'm bringing to the platform here. We're going to start with the Director of Foster Care, Adoption, and Process Improvement at Arms Wide Adoption and Foster Agency, Frederica Levias. Did I pronounce your last name correctly, Levias?
Correct. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for being here. She is going to, be weighing in from a foster care agency perspective. And then we also have someone from DePelchin Children's Center right here in Houston, Arnold Valdez. Can we go ahead and introduce Arnold? Arnold, thank you for being here. And he's also going to give us that foster agency perspective from the people who work hands-on with these kids. And then we also have former foster parents. I only have Laura's name, Laura Pebbles. And we have John and Laura Pebbles, okay? And they are foster parents. They have fostered children and right now have a 10-year-old in their house. So we'll be talking to them. And then last but certainly not least, I want to introduce my older sister who was a crucial part in this piece coming together, Natalie Hart. Hi, Natalie. How you doing? Before this piece aired, I called Natalie and I said, hey, I'm thinking about telling this story and I really can't tell it without you, without your voice, without your story too. And she didn't hesitate. She said, I'm willing to share it. I'd like to begin here because it's going to pivot into my first question, but I want to start with you, Nat. That moment when I talked about us being separated, first of all, everyone out there wants to know how you are. They're like, how's your sister? Natalie, how are you? People want to know.
I'm good. I'm alive, happy, I'm thriving. I have a child of my own now, so I'm doing well.
Yeah, she has my 7-year-old niece. She's 7 now, right? And smartest kid in the world. She's a super mom. Everybody's like, what does she do? She's a super mom first. For me, the most painful part of looking back at my foster care journey, even after, go ahead and mute a couple people there.
See if I can make sure that they're not on.
John, are you hearing us okay?
They're not on what?
They're not streaming.
Okay. I'm not sure what's going on with his mic there. April, are we sure what's happening here?
Just go ahead.
Okay. Okay. John and Laura are having some problems, so sorry about that interference. But for me, when I look back on my journey through foster care, one of the most painful moments for me, even after, 24 plus foster homes, was that moment when Natalie, you and I were split up. I remember it like it was yesterday. I tell people it was like a scene from The Color Purple. People who know that movie. It was very traumatic for me. And even I was 5 years old then. And that's still, after all of that time I spent in the system, one of the most painful memories I have. What do you remember about the day that we were separated? Hold on, let me unmute you.
I remember everything about that day. I think we both share the same feelings. We look at it the same way. It was devastating. I still remember what was said to us. I remember what we said to each other. I remember hugging you and us not wanting to let each other go. And yeah, it was traumatic, very traumatic, especially at such a young age.
Yeah. And when on that subject, I do want to pull in Frederica and Arnold, because we were so young when we were separated, and we were told the reason that we were separated was, from what I recall, is because we were fighting, or we would fight. And I'm like, well, what 5 and 7-year-old doesn't fight with their brother or sister? How difficult is it, from what you guys see, to keep siblings together?
I mean, I can go. I think it is difficult. One of the things is when there's, 2 siblings is not usually that hard, but when we start getting 3 and 4, it becomes, increasingly difficult, just because space and, and those kinds of things become an issue. The state has moved, I would say, made real efforts to try to keep siblings together whenever possible. And I've been doing this for 27 years. And I know that, when I first started, it wasn't even really a concern. You would just do what was most convenient. But here in probably the last 10, 15 years, there are a lot more efforts to keep siblings together, because we know that kids do best when they're with somebody that they know.
Exactly. Frederica, do you have any thoughts on that?
And thank you for sharing your story to both of you. I can't imagine, and that is the picture that I think all of us keep in our heads as we fight to try to keep siblings together. I agree with Arnold. There have been some improvements over the years, and more of a recognition of keeping siblings together, and of the importance of seeking out kinship or fictive kin placements to avoid just such trauma. One of the issues that used to come into play often, and Arnold may not know this, I don't think we've met in person, but I served at DePelchin for many years, way back then.
I've heard.
That's kind of where I got my, I learned a lot there. And so one of the things that we would see all the time was an issue with verification, because families back then, and a lot of times we still have these conversations, would come in with kind of the idea that I want this certain age group. I want a baby, or I want, a child that's kind of out of diapers already, or whatever the preference may be, based on kind of what will work best for their home. Well-intentioned. But what we would see is that baby would also have a 9-year-old brother, right? And if your verification, which is your license to have foster children in your home, only supports you having babies, and we haven't vetted the space or anything like that, a lot of times those are the issues that families kind of had their niches. And so I think the more we've talked about it, and the more that we've remained vigilant and diligent to talk to families and bring the awareness and kind of open their minds to the idea of, yes, you're still doing a great thing by wanting the baby, but let's take a step back and look at it from a full perspective of the child.
Let's not forget about that sibling, so to say.
Yeah. And so we see a lot more progress with it now.
Yeah. I think that we always say, one of the things I say is, this process can't be to the foster parents, I tell them it can't be about you. It has to be about the child. Like we need to do what's best for the child and meet the child's needs. And by doing that, your needs will get met. Like it's kind of, that's the secondary, right? Like, and that I think has shifted Frederica over, because I've been, when I first started, that was not even a consideration, right? It was like, well, this is what we can do. This is easy. And I think that just the more that's come out, the research about trauma and about connections, in the story, you said about kids aging out of care, the statistics say 70% of them, 7 out of every 10 children that age out of care will be homeless.
And we are going to get into those stats a little bit later. No, you're fine.
You have to cut me off because I like to talk.
We are going to get into those stats, but I definitely want to pull in John and Laura. And thank you guys for being with us. You guys are current foster parents. What is your, take on accepting siblings? Have you accepted siblings? Is that something you would be open to?
Yes, we currently have a sibling group of 2.
Wow.
We have done sibling groups of 3 before. So yes, we are open to it. And one of the other things that's possible too, sometimes when there's a large group, is maybe if they stay within an agency and one family's not able to take them all, but then you can do sibling visits with maybe another arms wide family or another family that has the siblings. So that's also an option.
That's awesome that you have actual siblings, so you can really provide some insight on that conversation. The fact of the matter is, and Arnold and Frederica, I'm sure will have a lot to say about this. There aren't enough parents like John and Laura. There aren't enough foster homes, especially in the state of Texas. We need good foster families, and there seems to be a shortage. Frederica, can you speak briefly to what we are seeing, not just across the nation? I mean, not just right here in Texas, but across the nation when it comes to foster homes. Has it gotten worse over the years?
Well, first, let me say the Pebbles are a high bar. They're pretty excellent. They have done so much for so many kids, and a lot of we learn from them as well. And they're so open to learning. These are the model of families that we would look for, and to just go on a small tangent on that, taking different types of children with different types of needs, different backgrounds, and able to adjust and adapt to what those particular kids need in that moment. It's really, as Arnold mentioned, it's really one of those things that at the heart of it, it has to be about what's best for kids. And we really see that shine in a lot of our families. And those are the families we look for. So, but across the state, what I think we all, and Arnold can jump in at any time, because I know they do a lot of research over there. What we see across the state of Texas is heightened monitoring, a lot more regulations, and a lot more oversight based on some things that have happened. I'm not saying whether or not that's good or bad. I'm saying that's the situation. So some of that may make people a little more hesitant to become foster parents. We also see that the shortage of the children that are seeing a lot of the shortage are not only sibling groups, but teenagers and teenagers with higher level needs. And to your point, Gabby, I love so much what you said in your story is that you went to 24 homes. Imagine the paperwork that was documented, and a foster parent at the end of that 24th placement looking at it and having to decide if that's a child that they're going to take in, because they've got this trail of paperwork of what looks like behaviors, and this child has moved and all of this. And rightfully so, some behaviors are present. A lot of them we've kind of self-inflicted on them because of the continual re-traumatization. So by the time they're a teenager, they're manifesting things in their behaviors that could be difficult for any foster parent to want to take on. And so what we have now is the children without placement.
And we are gonna, Frederica, we are. I have like a little bullet point thing here, and I do want to get to CWAP because that is going to tie directly into kind of how I want to, close out. But
okay, I'm sorry. I'm like Arnold. I'm a talker.
No, please don't apologize. That's the whole point of having a moderator for a panel. Is just to kind of, keep it on track. So I do want.
Can I say just one thing about that, about the siblings and the foster parents that we're seeing? One of the issues that we have is, we have for us is we have really good foster parents, and one of the things that we want them to do is really connect with the child in their home, right? Because we know that's what makes the difference. And so a lot of times what happens is, in the event that child becomes adoptable, then our foster parents will adopt, but then that really good foster home closes.
That's
because
really good.
And so it's kind of that, you have to ongoing recruit. We have to be recruiting all of the time, because if we have a home that does take a sibling group of 3, and then everything works out and those kids become adoptable, and the state says, oh, they've been with you for a year, do you want to adopt? And the foster parent says yes, then that foster home, as great as it is, closes.
That home is no longer open.
Right, for new kids, right? Because that's that family's forever home.
Yeah, we need foster parents coming in, just like the
Right.
foster parents that we see adopting.
And I know you're going to get into the CWAP, but as kids get older, right, it's like with each placement, it's that much harder. And it's not the child's fault, right? But I'll wait.
We're going to set you. Arnold. Hold on, Arnold. So first, I want to stay on the topic of the need for good foster families. My sister, I do want to pull in here, because when I did my Zoom interview with you, Nat, you talked about, I asked you, what went wrong in the first few foster homes that we had? And you made a really good point. You said, we were these kids who came from a completely different background, and as I mentioned in my story, our biological family didn't mistreat us. So we were treated very well. But we went to a completely different scenario. And you explained it perfectly, Nat. Can you kind of chime in on that? Some of the issues we faced in those first few foster homes?
One of the main ones that sticks out for me was corporal punishment. Our foster parents whooped us when we had never been whooped in our lives. Our mother never put her hands on us. I think one time I had an aunt whoop me and I completely deserved it, but that was something that we were not used to. And it would be for the smallest things. And I always had a problem understanding why I was taken away from a parent who never abused me. And then we were put in homes where people were constantly abusing us. That was very hard to understand and deal with.
Yeah. And you also talked about the parenting style of one of the homes we went to.
Yeah. Just completely different parenting styles. I remember our first home, the women it was 2 ladies. They were sisters, I believe. And they were way older than our mother. I think these women were in like their 60s or 70s. And it was just like a completely different generation trying to deal with these you were 4, I think, at the time. Yeah, we were 3 and 7, actually. So it was, it just didn't make sense. I'm not sure why we got placed with them. I don't know why they thought that would be a good fit. They didn't have children our age or anything. So yeah, it was very hard to deal with.
What do you, Frederica, Arnold, what do you guys think, just quickly, about the need to make sure the child you're placing fits in the home that they're going into?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what Frederica was talking about earlier with the, your preferences, right? So I always tell people, we want, there's so many kids out there that need a home. So we're looking for homes for kids, not the other way around, right? Like not kids for homes, right? People come in with an idea and I'm like, I can't find that kid because you made them up in your brain. Like they don't exist. And so we really look at like opening your opportunity and realizing that the kids that are out there that need homes are going to have challenges. I mean, every foster child has suffered trauma, right? Otherwise they wouldn't be a foster child.
Right.
So like we have people that say, oh, I want a baby that doesn't have any issues. And I'm like, that baby's with their parents.
Yeah.
Like that's not why you're doing this. Right. And so we have to understand. And that's why I think over the years, and Frederica, I know you've been doing it for a while too. For me, and the one thing that I think the state got right is because they get some stuff wrong, but it's increasing the training, not the hours, but the kind of training that foster parents have to have. They have to have trauma-informed care, right? We teach from a no spank philosophy. Like there's all of these things that have to fit
Yeah, that's actually one of my questions, training when it comes to dealing with children with trauma. This is something that I found a lot of the homes I went into lacked and really didn't know. They thought I was just, a ticking time bomb, but really I had all of this pain. And I tried to explain this to people. It's like, they say that foster children are 10 times more likely to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder than war veterans. And I stopped one day and I asked myself, how is that possible? And it's because there's no boot camp. There's nothing to prepare you or train you to be ripped away from your family and placed into a home with strangers, and strangers who mistreat you at that. I do want to pull in John and Laura quickly. When it comes to training for children with trauma, what does that training look like for you all? Have you guys received that?
And we've received quite a bit of training. I mean, and it varies by the age group that we have, but of course it's there is no more corporal punishment in foster care. So let's be clear about that. That doesn't happen. But it's redirection. It might be timeout at times. It's trying to divert their attention. It's with the older ones. Sometimes it's just sitting and talking to them. But I'm not trying to oversimplify, but these children generally just need and want love. They want to be loved and they want to be cared for. And so, we try very hard to treat our foster children the same way that we treated our biological children. We try to love them and care for them and treat them with respect, listen to what they have to say, try to understand where they're coming from, because we know they're coming from a different place. It's our environment may be completely different than theirs, but we can find a middle ground, and we can find things that'll work, and we can find compromise that allows them to have the independence that maybe they need, but at the same time has them follow the rules that need to be followed in order for this household to function.
Yeah, very good. And I do think we need to just point out, because you seem like, and we've already heard that, you kind of set the standard in your home for what a good foster family should look like. But corporate punishment wasn't something that was supposed to be happening, or corporal punishment when we were in foster care. And it's not something that should be happening now, but it did happen, and it does still happen. I do news stories all the time about children who are being mistreated. And I love that there's a home like you who says, no, it doesn't exist anymore. We need more parents that think like that. Like, there's no way, but the fact is we need more good foster families.
Right.
There aren't enough people getting involved. Before we move on to the next half of the conversation, there's a question I've been told someone wants to present. April, can we pull that question up? And amazingly, right, my question is, how is our relationship with our mother? Natalie, do you Natalie, do you want to take that one? I think our relationship with our mother, and we'll answer this quickly and then get back to the conversation, is different. I think we both have two different relationships with our mother. Natalie, if you'd like to speak for yourself.
We do. We each have a very different. I would say that my relationship with my mother is strained. As I got older, I did realize why we were taken away. I didn't understand it as a child, but I started to see, her mental health issues. As an adult, I have tried to, have a better relationship with her, but due to her mental health, we just can't see eye to eye. I'm a very logical, I'm a realist, and it's been hard. It's been very hard for me to cope with the things she says and the way she sees the world. We do still talk. She sees her granddaughter, but I wouldn't say we're very close. It's impossible for us to be at this point.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's impossible for us to be close, and I'll answer briefly. And Natalie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think maybe I have a little bit more patience when it comes to her. And I think that's only because Natalie was older and knew her before her mental health declined. So I think for you, sometimes you get more frustrated that, because you knew her then, when the only version of her I ever knew was the version that I have now.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I remember when things were okay. And I think that was kind of hard for me to deal with, to just kind of watch her mind deteriorate. And maybe that's more something with me. Maybe that's not her problem, but I'm still learning and I'm still coping. And that's something that I deal with every day.
And that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. So now, Arnold, Frederica, we are going to get to the topic that you guys have been trying to get to. You've been trying to beat me there. Teenagers. Teenagers are one of the hardest groups. I know children of color as well sometimes. Correct me if I'm wrong. But teenagers right now are one of the hardest groups to place in a foster home. Why?
Well, I think, just when we start talking about teenagers, we assume there's a lot of things that we kind of assume, and it happens is they've been in the system longer. So the chances that they've had multiple placements increases, right? And we always say with each placement, it gets harder for them to adjust and connect because it's just another person that, has let them down. Right. And so one of the things that I really think is so healthy and really just a true testament to you and Natalie is what Natalie said in the piece where she said that one mom did erase things because it showed me that not everybody was bad, that there are relationships that, are positive. And I think that's the piece that we have to, kind of help the kids understand what a positive, healthy relationship looks like. And those are the examples that help them the most. The other thing I want to say is the kids have challenging behaviors, but they're all human nature survival things. Like if you rip somebody away from an adult, away from the people that they love, they would fight and lie and run away. And run to those people. If you told me I couldn't see my wife or couldn't talk to my wife, I would, go behind your back and steal a phone. It's like, those are things that as adults we see as, if somebody came and took my wife, I would get violent. I would do whatever, right? If they were trying to physically remove her from me, and everybody would think that's fine. But when the kids do that, everybody freaks out. Well, it's the same feelings. It's the same thing. And we have to understand that these children, because they've suffered the trauma, they don't have the coping skills or the kind of the social social things to be things that are accepted. Like I'm a fighter. My back of the brain behavior is fight. I want to punch people all the time, but I know I can't do that. I wouldn't have a job. I wouldn't have, right? So I use the skills that I have. And that's what we try to do with the kids, is help them learn those skills so they can get their needs met appropriately, right? They just don't have that. They don't have good examples.
Right. Frederica, as a teenager, I remember, I was maybe 12 even. And I remember the foster mother who I had at the time, I was doing very well in her home. She handled me very well. And I was up for adoption. And she didn't want to adopt me. And I remember her saying one day, "No, I don't want to adopt you. I want me a little girl that looks like this." And it was a picture of a little girl, and much smaller than me. Some might have argued a cuter kid than I was. We saw the pictures. So there's this thing is, no, I want my own little daughter when you might have a 12, 14-year-old sitting right in front of your face. How does this impact teenagers who are 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, knowing that people don't want them?
Yeah, that I'm so sorry. Somebody that, and again, my hope is that we've come farther with training families, understanding it, that what you say is important, and training families on attachment and relationship and that sort of thing. Because what I would imagine that you would have been feeling would be rejection, to add on top of the trauma, right? And so that would do a lot to someone's self-worth, right? I'm going to be honest, I'm having trouble remembering your question just because I felt like that comment was so egregious.
No worries. I'm just saying, what does this do to the teens, knowing, like you said, when we talked about this earlier, we mentioned CWAP, which means, for those who don't know, children without placement. Right now in the state of Texas, we have children who are living in hotels. So, Natalie, back in our day, we had the group homes, but there are actually children who there's nowhere to place them in the state. So they're in hotels with caseworkers monitoring them. They're eating, they get vouchers, I guess, for restaurants from what I've heard. But I can't imagine as a 14, a 15, a 16-year-old coming home to a hotel, going in my room, closing the door, and it's just me.
Yeah.
And
it sends that further message. And
right.
It gives it. I can remember a specific case where I had a teenage boy, and I was a case manager then, and he had been in quite a bit of trouble over the years. He had been adopted. He and his sibling group, the parents had some issues. His sibling group of 5 were adopted together, which was amazing. And then the adoptive parents died. Well, you know, they had been through significant trauma before they came into care. So there were some manifestations of behavior from there based on the rejection. Those things heightened. And I just recall at the end of it, we did have to ask CPS to get involved and try to help us find another placement, because we were seeing a lot of acting out on his behalf. And remember, this is a 16, 17-year-old boy who has just been through losing his parents, losing his adoptive parents. Then his biological siblings were even still with the adoptive
He had that trauma.
family. He had all that trauma. And I called CPS, and the worker at that time, the response was not what you would have thought it would be.
Right.
And thankfully we moved it up the chain, and that was handled. But the moment that child at 16 or 17 realized no one is coming to get me, you could see it in his face. Even though,
And I think
these things have happened.
And Gabby, I would
his behavior was this, but that moment you could just see the light bulb go off that said, no one's coming to get me. And that will only manifest into something even the more.
The wall, right?
Right. That wall is going to go up more strongly. And
I think one of the things is in Texas. And so, Gabby, if you were 12 and that foster parent said that they didn't want to adopt you, just a natural kind of reaction to that would be, well, I didn't want to be adopted anyway, right? And so, or that would, because you wouldn't. That's just kind of how kids do, right? They're not gonna let themselves be vulnerable. If I don't like you, if I don't let you love me, then you can't hurt me, right? And so, one of the things that happens is in the state of Texas, if you're 14 and you don't want to be adopted, they can't make you. Right. So you have these kids that have maybe been like in your situation where there was a foster mother that they really liked, and for whatever reason they decided not to adopt. And then they're like, I don't want to go through that again, so I'm just not going to want to be adopted.
Yeah. Wow.
And they push, and it pushes everyone away.
Yeah.
Right. And that, because I can imagine being 12 years old thinking, okay, I really am doing well here. This is a great place. Like, why can't I stay here forever until I'm 18, right? And then the mom says, well, I want a younger kid or whatever. And then in your mind, you go and you're like, I'm not going to let myself feel that again. I'm not going to want to be adopted. I don't want to connect.
You're going to protect yourself. You're going to shut yourself off. When we look at some of the statistics, what is this? Someone says here, manager says, it's sad how many people who have great homes and great jobs and backgrounds, and the system still doesn't allow them to have a foster child. We are going to talk as we get a little bit closer to the end of this. We're winding down about what it takes to become a foster family. But first, I want to look at some of the statistics that are stacked against any child that touches the foster care system. And they're alarming. We already mentioned the PTSD one. In my story, you saw that less than 3% of foster children who have been in foster care will actually earn a college degree, a 4-year college degree. 7 out of 10.
The other sad part about that is it's paid for.
Yeah.
On top because they're a foster kid.
Yeah, there's money for it. That's true. You get money to go to college. 7 out of 10 girls who age out of foster care will become pregnant before the age of 21. After reaching the age of 18, 20% of children who were in foster care will instantly become homeless. Only 1 out of every 2 foster kids who age out of the system will have some form of gainful employment by the age of 24. We look at these statistics, and before I go back to our foster agency experts, I want to pull back in Nat. Nat, we haven't heard from you in a while. When you hear these statistics, what would you say from someone who has been in the foster care system, who has that inside kind of expertise? And we didn't just go through one home, we went through multiple homes. What would change the narrative, the trajectory for foster children?
The only thing that can change it, honestly, is the child themselves. I mean, I was a pretty aware child. I was smart. I knew what was going on. And I used to say, I remember probably as young as 13, I don't want to become a statistic. And people would look at me like I was crazy, but it was like somehow I just knew. I knew that the odds were stacked against me. So I always worked very hard to not let that happen. I was like, I'm gonna graduate high school. I went to college. I didn't graduate, but I've always had a job. I was like, I'm not having a baby at a young age. You know what I mean? I want to be successful. I want to be fulfilled in life. I think it just takes a certain amount of determination. I mean, it's not going to be like that for everybody. Some people don't know how to thrive without a support system. And I mean, thankfully for myself, I was able to kind of figure out how to do it alone for the most part.
Yeah. And I go back to, because it's not just foster parents, it's the social workers you meet, it's the teachers. It was some of the women who worked in the group home I was in. I remember little things they would say. I met a lot of bad people when I was in foster care. I met a lot of unkind people. And what I always drive home is that sometimes I think about them, but I don't think about them often, but I always think about the good people. I always remember the lady who worked at the group home. I can't remember her name, but she would always say, Gabby, when life gives you lemons, you got to make lemonade. And the teacher who would say, no, don't go to the principal's office. Come in my class, sit in the back while I'm teaching and do this. You know, I remember those people who went the extra mile to make me feel accepted.
I was able to do the same instead of, dwelling on all the bad experiences that I had in the system. And there were so many. In my life now, I'm able to pick out, like you said, those small moments from those good people. There are women that worked in the group home that I'm friends on Facebook with now. They message me here and there. They say, it's so great to see, your daughter, what a beautiful mother you've become. You have to focus on the positive at the end of the day. And that's what I try to do. I've always tried to do that.
Yeah, that's an important note for foster kids to take from this, is that focus on the positive. John and Laura, I want to go ahead and pull you guys in. I mean, you're listening to this conversation. I know right now you guys said you have a 10-year-old, but hearing this and hearing the need for, teens to really be fostered, would you guys consider taking an older child after this conversation? Or if you were listening to this, do you think this is going to kind of scare people away? Hey, I don't want to deal with that kind of trauma. I want it very easy, very simple. What are your thoughts?
Well, I find it kind of interesting, and I don't want to minimize the challenges that foster parents face with some of their foster children. But even with our own biological children, we don't walk around writing down every problem that they have, as they go through life. But it seems like sometimes in the foster system, we're documenting things, the CPS workers tracking things, they're keeping up with things. And, some of the acting out is just part of growing up. Trust me, I had 3 children, and my 3 children were all over the place. And so, that being said, I don't think that it scares people off. I think that what people need to understand is that, with an agency, we're with arms wide. With our agency, with our CPS workers that we work closely with the CASA workers, with all the people that are involved, we have a network of people that are there that help us and that guide us when we need guidance and support us when we just need support. And so I think the system is set up, if it's functioning properly, and sometimes it doesn't function properly. Let's just be honest. But when it's functioning properly, and most of the time it does, you have support there to help you get through the challenges that you're going to have, with a 14-year-old, with a 15-year-old. But you can't be naive and say it's going to be the same as it is when you have a 3-year-old. With a 3-year-old, I could pick them up and put them in timeout. 15-year-old, it didn't quite going to go that way.
Is that a challenge you'd be willing to take on, John and Laura, or not so sure?
I think we'd have to see how it fit into our life.
Yeah.
I mean, we're at a point in our life where I'm starting to think about retirement, and I've got to decide what it is that we want to do when we retire.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Arnold, Frederica, my question to you, we've talked about the odds stacked up against foster kids, the need for good foster homes. How can people get involved? What if there is someone who says, you know what, I want to help these teens, but I don't want to take on that full role. Maybe they say what John said, I'm thinking about retiring, but I still want to help. What can they do?
Well, there's a couple things they can do. And one thing is we have a facility with kids that have aged out of care and then opted back into foster, right? So they're 18 to 21. We have 20 young adults. They're not kids that are coming back. And, our goal is to help them get their education, get something together, work on a trade, so that when they leave us, they can be more independent. And one of the things I do want to say is for people to understand that, the statistics are out there that kids will be homeless, right? But when you look at what makes the kids that are not home, successful, what makes them successful versus the other ones, the research says it's one connection outside of the system, right? And people say, how do these kids get homeless? Well, they age out, they have a car, they have a job, they have an apartment, and then they get a flat tire. And so because being in foster care, everybody kind of fixes everything for you. They just sit, right? But if they called their connection, and it's not a financial thing, it's them calling somebody and the person saying, start walking to work right now so that you can get paid, right? To help them over those kind of things that are just life, right? And so I think it's about just connecting. So there are those opportunities as well. But back to your question about foster care, I think, and Frederica, all the agencies are similar in the way that you get started, which is an orientation. Go to our website and attend an information session. One of the things I will say is look into your agency. Make sure, make sure that their philosophy fits with yours. Make sure that you feel comfortable and confident with the people you're looking at, because there's a lot of agencies out there, right? And Arms Wide is amazing. They're the president and CEO. It was my boss for a long time. We work together a lot. And so, but there are other agencies that are maybe smaller, don't have the resources. And like Frederica said earlier, the climate out there for us right now is not friendly.
Yeah. And like you said, there are so many agencies. We posted the resources on our website, fox26houston.com, you can go click on a link to find out how to become a foster parent for Arms Wide. But Frederica, if you really just had to briefly break it down, layman terms, what does it take to qualify to be a foster parent?
To break it down in layman's terms, you basically have to want to be a resource for kids. You have to have a home. It doesn't have to be a home that you own. It could be an apartment, but you have to have the space. You have to have, obviously, cleared background checks. Be willing to go through the process, the home study process. So there are several steps to it, but as Arnold mentioned, there is support along the way. And I will say
really quickly, what does that background check entail? What if there's someone out there who has a misdemeanor, who has a non-violent, felony, and they say, hey, you know what, this was in my past. I would love to get involved. I'm a changed person. Is there a space for them to do anything or no?
Well, the regulations set the standard for what's acceptable and what is not. So there are some things that would preclude certain there are certain things that would preclude someone from being able to move forward in the process. Not everything, and especially we see this a lot with kinship families. And let me just say that that is something that we are really focused on at this moment, and I'll circle back to that in a moment. But with kinship families, we see this a lot because a lot of times trauma is generational. Right. But grandma who had this incident when she was 20, well, now she's 60, we can do, there's what's called a risk evaluation and determine whether or not that particular issue is still a risk to a child today.
And one thing, Gabby, that we look for is patterns.
I want Frederica to be able to land her plane really quick.
Okay.
Would you want to close that really quickly, Frederica, and then we'll go back to Arnold for a quick second?
Okay. Well, so there is that process of risk evaluation that is available for some charges. There are some things that are absolute bars, and so I would say go to the orientation or the information meeting and get the information, and someone can help you. But if I can just really quick circle back to the question that you asked earlier about what can people do to get involved, even if it's not fostering. We recognize that not everyone wants to be a foster parent, and I don't mean that in terms of doesn't want to be, but they don't have the capacity, the time, and all of that, but they do want to do something. There is a concept called a village, and we have a program called It Takes a Village, and a part of that is being able to find a space that works for you. It may be being a part of our advisory council.
There's different kinds of opportunities, so to say, within that. It takes a village.
There's so many different opportunities. So reach out to us. Okay.
People to get involved. And we do have, I do want to point out, we do have a link to your website, to Arms Wide and to DePelchin Children's Center on our website. So you can go and you can click there and it'll take you to all those resources. I know I'm getting a message that we have another question. We have time for one last question.
Can I just really quickly, the background checks. When you come to orientation, be honest with us about what you did and we can help you, right? If you had one mess up in college 10, 15 years ago, chances are, you know, we had one DWI 10 years ago, chances are we're going to be okay. If it's pattern things, it becomes more difficult. And if you're not honest with us, it becomes a lot harder for us because we will find out.
Yeah. So be honest, you know, be upfront. Hey, even if they call, this is something I want to do, but this is my background, you know, be honest. So
because, as Earl said, we will find out because the background checks wasn't clear.
And now you're not just a felon, but you're a liar. And
Texas DPS, Texas Central Registry for Abuse and Neglect, and FBI fingerprints across the country. So.
So don't come
20 years ago, it's going to come into play. So, but you know, if it's,
we are going, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, but if you're honest with us and you come forward, you know, we can tell you pretty quick if it's something that's a bar or if it's something that we can move forward and maybe have an opportunity to pursue with the risk evaluation. And a lot of that depends on the scenario, especially with kinship families and kin families, which would be that teacher you're talking about. Because we don't want aging out of care without that permanent connection. You know, we talked about a kid having a car and an apartment, but not knowing what to do with a lot of our kids age out without any of those resources. Who tells them to have a car? Who tells them how to go get your driver's license? Who do you call in where you normally call your parents?
We do want to just really quickly, because we are running down on time here, and I do want to give Natalie and John and Laura time to have some closing thoughts as well. We do have one more question that we have time to take. We're going to pop that up. This is for, I believe, Natalie and I once again. How were you two able to keep in touch with each other through the years? Natalie, what do you recall? I recall some visits in there every now and then.
We were lucky and blessed enough because for some reason we weren't allowed to speak. When we got first separated, we weren't allowed to have visits, but we lived fairly close to each other. Our neighborhoods were close, and our foster moms, I remember we ran into each other at a store. I don't know if you remember this. We were at Walgreens and we ran into each other, and our respective foster mothers met. And they were both from the South, I think Alabama and Mississippi, and they got along really well. And they were like, you know what? We're going to let these girls spend some time together. So we started talking on the phone, and then we were allowed to go over each other's houses.
I remember, now that you bring
it up, great.
Vaguely, now that you bring it up, I remember that moment because we embraced each other.
I'll never forget it. In the candy aisle. I will never forget it.
And our foster mothers were looking at us like, what's going on here? And we're like, this is my sister. No, this is my sister. It's actually crazy to think about.
Yeah, that was amazing. And then, I mean, I do remember you got adopted briefly. We couldn't speak during that. So there were periods where we would be able to talk and then we wouldn't speak for years. And then I remember when I was in high school, I hadn't seen you for like 3 years, and I had another foster mother who was one of the good ones, And she surprised me. She had gotten in touch with your family and they brought you down to visit me. And you just showed up in my kitchen one day.
Yeah, in Columbus. I
Tall
remember
and beautiful. And like you had hit puberty since I had seen you last. And I'm like, who is this model? I'm like, that's my sister. And I just broke down. And that was beautiful.
Yeah. And she was working.
The families that are willing to go that mile.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely went the extra mile, and Natalie was about 14 then, and you know it just reminds me. And then once we turned 16, just to finish answering the question, once I turned 16, I really reconnected with my biological family. Natalie and I eventually became roommates once we were older and you know out on our own. And you know, now she has my niece. My niece is beautiful, smart. You know, she speaks Spanish. She speaks a little Chinese. Like, she's doing a great mom, super mom.
Looks like you, but whatever.
So now everybody's so happy that, you know, that to put the connection together and know that you're doing well. And I do want to bring in someone saying here, so happy that you were able to see each other. Thank you for sharing. John and Laura, any final thoughts? You know, do you have a quick, you know, anything you learned from this that you're taking away, or just anything you want to get across really quickly?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that when I think about our experience that I think that I want to share is that one of the most beneficial things that we've had of being a foster parent is as our children have come into our life, our foster children have come into our life and they've left. With so many of these families, we've developed lifelong relationships. We stay in touch with the children. We've kind of become an aunt, uncle, or another set of grandparents, but we've been able to stay in so many of their lives. And so, you know, our lives have just, and our family has just grown and grown and grown. And it's been a beautiful thing. It's been a great thing and a fantastic experience that I wouldn't trade for anything.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I can tell you that matters, you know, and just to give you a little bit of encouragement as foster parents, there was times when my foster parents didn't think that what they were saying to me was getting through, that it was going in one ear and out the other, that they weren't making a difference. They grew frustrated. And I always like to tell people that there's things I implement now at 34 years old that my foster parent told me when I was 10. And I'm just now like, you know what, maybe that was good advice. Maybe I should use it. I always say, don't ever feel like your words, your care, your energy is going in vain, because you never know when they're going to pick that up and take it with them. You know, so as long as you drop it, that's your job. So thank you guys for doing what you do. Natalie.
And isn't it the job of parenting? Yeah. Isn't that parenting? You tell them when they're young, and then when we call you and say, oh,
maybe one day they'll listen. Yeah, listen, I had a hard head, but I was listening, you know, and then I soaked it in and I used it when I needed it. So Arnold, Frederica, thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation. I really wish we had more time, because I feel like we could have went 2 hours. I mean, it's such an important conversation, and I look forward to connecting with all of you more in the future, because I plan to just stay on top of this and really continue to delve into what's happening in the foster care system. So thank you so much, Arnold, Frederica. If you'd like to learn more, everybody at home, about Arms Wide or DePelchin Children's Center, head over to fox26houston.com. You can find links to their website. You can ask them questions. Again, thank you, John and Laura, for being a part of this conversation and taking the time out. Thank you for being great foster parents and just what seems like kind people. So appreciate that. And Natalie Hart, thank you for coming on. Thank you for allowing me, because I really wouldn't have been able to do this story without your participation, or it wouldn't have had the same impact. So I love you. I'm happy we reconnected. Me and my sister talk quite often now. We're both, you know, comedians. At least we like to think so. So, you know, Natalie said something to me, and I'll close with this. She told me when we were speaking, she said, I don't think I would be the parent that I am today if I hadn't gone through the foster care system and witnessed all these different parenting styles. And when I tell you, for everybody at home asking, Natalie was at Disneyland or Disney, something in Orlando, a Magic World. It was something in Orlando, an amusement park. And she's out in Orlando, just her and my niece is eating sushi. And I said, Natalie, she's 6 years old. Why do you have her at a 5-star sushi restaurant? And my sister says, she has a very advanced palate. And I will close with that. Everything is good. Hey, foster care matters. Foster kids matter. Join in on the conversation on my Facebook, Twitter page. Head over to fox26houston.com and also watch the full story if you missed it. Thank you guys so much. Until next time, I am Gabby Hart, and thank you to all my guests.
Thank you for having us.